Mike Gabbianelli, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesdays. Today's episode is going to be about layering. And what we're talking about in layering is the type of clothes and the amount of clothes that we wear in the outdoors to keep us comfortable and warm and happy when we're out doing fun stuff like camping or biking or any of the other activities we like to do out in the woods. So, the first thing to remember when we are talking about layering is to understand the 4 different ways that our body loses heat. Because when we're talking about layering, we're talking about heat and what we're doing with it, letting it out or keeping it in, depending on if it's cold or hot. So let's get into those 4 ways that our body loses heat. The first way that our body loses heat is through evaporation and perspiration. So that means through sweating and breathing. And so when we sweat and we breathe, we let out water, and that cools our body down when that water evaporates. And so that evaporative cooling, as we call it, is the first way that our bodies will lose heat. The second way our body loses heat is through radiation, and that means our bodies are constantly radiating heat into the environment around us through our skin. So, that being said, when it's hot outside, we want to promote that radiation. When it's cold outside, we want to trap that heat and not let it away. Conduction. So we lose heat. The third way we lose heat is through conduction. And conduction means when we are in contact with something, like physically in contact with something solid, we will lose heat to that object if it is colder than us. And so think about sitting on a cold metal bench when you are when your body is hot, it's going to cool your body down. When your body's cold, it's still going to cool your body down. So coming in contact with anything is going to trigger that conductive heat loss. Great. And the last form of heat loss is convection. And so convection means when air and water molecules pass over our skin, they actually cool us off. And so this is through contact with water or contact with wind. And so wind and water are 2 things that we want to be that can cool our bodies very rapidly. And so we want to be very aware of that. And so just to recap, we have the 4 ways that our body loses heat: evaporative and perspiration. So through evaporation and perspiration, we lose heat through radiation. So we're constantly producing heat in our skin. We lose heat through conduction. And so if we're in contact with something cold, we are going to conduct heat. And we lose heat through convection. And so convection is going to be wind and water that are going to cool our bodies down. So when we layer, we have to choose the right kind of layers to work with those types of heat loss. And so we're going to talk about first, obviously, if it's cool or hot outside, we need to cool our bodies down. We can use these same heat loss principles to our benefit and to help us lose heat. That being said, we also want to make sure that our layers are the right amount, not too much or not too little, so that we won't be sweating in our too many layers, which will cool us off, or too cold and too little layers, which is going to promote that radiation. So the 3 types of layers that we have are, first, our base layer. And so our base layer is going to be what we're going to wear on our skin. So what we want to remember with our base layer is never to wear anything cotton normally, because cotton is something that will really keep you cool and cold when it gets wet. And so we want to try to use stuff that if it gets wet, it'll still keep us a little bit warm. So we have polypropylene stuff here. We can also wear wool. And so this is just a nice kind of thinner layer that you're going to wear on your base. And again, our layers can be different depending on how cold it is outside, right? So this is our base layer. And this might be enough for the conditions depending, right? That being said, if it's not enough, we're going to have a thermal layer. And so what this is going to do is going to help keep that radiation in near our bodies. And so I have a nice down coat I can put on, and this is going to help insulate my body. So as I radiate heat out, I'm going to radiate it into my coat, and my coat is going to trap it and keep me warm, right? So this is, again, if I'm getting cold at night while we're camping and the temperature's dropped or something like this, I'm going to throw on my thermal layer, and that's going to keep me warm. That's also going to come in different down, down comes in more and less. So this is even warmer coat, and if it was that cold, I might throw that coat on instead. Same with my base layers. I have a kind of a heavier base layer here, right? And so if the base layer I was wearing wasn't enough, I could always increase that base layer. Great. And then remember our last kind of cooling that we haven't really done anything about is that convection cooling, right? And so that, remember, that's wind. So this might break some of the wind, but it's not really designed for that. It's designed to insulate what's inside. So we need a windbreaker or a wind jacket. And so I have one here that I use, keeps small so I can have it on me at all times. And again, the wind is actually a very powerful coolant for our bodies. So we always want to make sure we're prepared for it. We get a lot of wind in Colorado as well. And so I can actually put that layer on over top my thermal layer. And now, not only am I insulating the radiative heat inside my coat and my base layer, but now I am blocking out the wind that's going to be coming across my body and increasing that convective heat loss in my body. So with this on, I'm really going to be super toasty. I'm getting warm already because of my awesome layers. Again, this wind layer could be upgraded, so this is a slightly larger and more sturdy windbreaker that I have, a little more waterproof. This one's nice because it's small and I can bring it with me at all times. Great. The last thing I want to mention about layers is these layers can be used in tandem outside of this same order, right? And so I like to think about it like when we're in Colorado, we have a lot of wind, and so if it gets a little cool and windy, I might be able to put on my base layer and my wind layer and not a thermal layer and have the perfect temperature, because if I have too much layering, I'm going to start to sweat. And if I sweat, I'm actually going to cool myself off in my nice big down coat. So we don't want to sweat and we don't want to be cold. We want to find that happy medium when we're feeling just nice. Great. So that's been layering, guys. Hope you guys have some fun out there and try to do some layering with what you have around the house. And try to find what you think would be a good layering system that would work for you. So you have that ready to go anytime you're going to be outside and you're worried it might get cold on you. Great. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.